Hi guys, it's Brian here at the Peace of Eden Homestead. Uh, Thought today I'd run you through my to-do list for this year. It's always, gets a little overwhelming when you're trying to get a whole lot of stuff done, and it's kind of nice to have a list and break it up into different things so that you can tackle things one day, one step, one dream at a time. Well, I figured today I would just walk you guys around and show you what some of the things I want to do. Uh, and the first thing on the list is make some more of these raised beds. So let me show you what we got going. Last year, I put up these raised beds. They are 4 feet wide, 8 feet long, and 3 feet deep. And they're made of 2-inch thick pine, and they worked out fantastically last year. I put the arch here in between them so that I could grow tomatoes or cucumbers or whatever up there and walk underneath it and pick it. And that worked out really well last year. And I would like to convert the rest of this space into raised beds. Of course, that won't all get done at once, but my goal for this year is to get at least 2 more of these raised beds. I'm thinking we'll put one there and probably start another row of them over here. Um, but that's maybe not the first thing to do this year, but that's definitely one of the high priorities of the year. All right, number two on my list, and these are in not necessarily in any particular order. I haven't prioritized them yet, but number two on my list is to empty the kiln. So I'm going to walk down there and show you what's going to go on with that. So number two on the list is to empty the kiln. And I've come to find that um, one of my favorite activities here on the homestead is milling lumber. That probably has to do with struggling to be able to afford lumber for the 40 some odd years that I've been doing woodworking, or 30, almost 40 years. And so when I get a chance to get a log on the mill and mill it, I'm just very pleased. It's almost like a treasure hunt to see the grain inside. But that being said, when you mill lumber, it's very wet and it needs to be dried. So a way to dry that is in a kiln. And you can stack it up and air dry it like this stuff back here. And it takes about a year per inch of thickness to dry it. And it still doesn't get down completely dry. But when you have a solar kiln, which is kind of like a greenhouse, then it heats up more inside the kiln and dries out. Well, last year we pretty well filled the kiln. I'm not sure if you can see on the camera through the windows the stacks of lumber in there, but I'll come over here and open it up to show you what's inside. So I have stacks and stacks of lumber, big lumber, little lumber, thick lumber, thin lumber, all kinds of stuff. And like some of these big ones are over 2 feet wide, 2 inches thick, and 12 feet long. So those are really heavy. I put those in there by myself, and it was not an easy task. And I'm sure it won't be easy to get this all cleared out. And the building's 25 feet long, and it's pretty full of lumber, 8 feet wide, and we got a stack about 6 feet tall. So a lot of lumber to move. So I get that out of there, and that way I can get this lumber that I've already milled into the kiln. And I have stacks of lumber here, stacks of lumber there, stacks of lumber everywhere. But that way I can get it dried out, and I'll be able to sell it, which is another big thing on the list. So selling that lumber is going to help me to be able to recoup the cost of the sawmill and the tractor that are the tools that I need to mill the lumber. Sorry, I was looking at the list here. And another thing that goes along with all this is that currently the kiln is kind of ugly and just wrapped in house wrap or Tyvek, and I have siding cut for most of it. So one of the other things on my list is to put the siding on the kiln and make it look a little nicer. And you know, one thing leads to another. In order to get the wood out of the kiln, I have to have a place to put it. So um, that's another thing on the list, is to clear out a spot to store all this lumber before it's sold. Another item on the list here, this is a sawmill. It's covered in a tarp right now, but there's a log right there. I'll walk around the other side so you can see. But if you see right here is the clamp or dog that holds that log in place to keep it from rolling. And on the other side here, there are other dogs that hold the pressure from the other side of the log. Now, as you can see, those are pretty high, and I can't take very much of a cutout on such a small log. This log's probably about 14, 16 inches on that side and probably 20 inches on that side. And that's really pushing the limits on how small of a log I can mill on this mill. So another item on my list is to make some fixtures for this mill that will hold smaller logs up and eliminate the need for the dogs and the clamp. So that's one more thing on the to-do list. And that way I can mill smaller logs, like if I have, you know, a premium log or a valuable species of wood that's a smaller log, I'll still be able to mill it and get as much lumber out of it as I can. So after that, we will have to refill the kiln, which, as you can see, I have tons of stuff to put in the kiln, and that'll leave me space here to stack up the lumber from all of those logs and all of those logs and all of those logs after I get them milled. So as I empty that kiln, there's this, I think it's a 53-foot long semi-trailer back here behind the barn. And there's a bunch of miscellaneous car parts and lawn tools and stuff like that in there right now. But I'll have to clear this out and then move all of the lumber into there for storage, because once it's dry, you want to keep it dry. So until I get better storage built specifically for lumber, this will be my storage area for the lumber. So let's take a look and see what else is on our list. So the next thing on the list is this year, probably not this year, probably next year, we want to get livestock here. By livestock, I'm thinking beef cattle, possibly sheep, goats, not sure. But here is a fairly cleared out area, and then it's next to the barn, so there's a bunch of big tall trees that will need to come down so they don't risk falling on the barn. I'll show you in a minute why I'm so concerned about that. But anyway, I'll have this area even more cleared out and plant some you know, alfalfa and other food for the cattle in there. Fence it in, build a little barn for them to shelter in and stuff like that, so that we can have livestock here. So a big part of that job is not only taking the trees out, but also building the fence and the barn, or you know, shelter anyway. It won't be a big barn. It'll just be something for them to get in out of the wind and rain. So, all right, let's walk over and show why taking these trees down is so important. So as you can see, this used to be a nice little picnic pavilion with a grill and a picnic table under it. And unfortunately, this tree right here fell down, hit the roof, and took it down. And then I'll show you another really good example of why I want to take the trees out that can hit the buildings. So here's another tree that blew down. That thing just missed the house. You can't tell from this end, but it's a pretty good sized tree. The base of it's probably 16 inches in diameter. It's probably 50 feet tall, and just barely missed the side of the house when it fell. And as you can see, there are lots and lots and lots more trees that can fall and hit the house and the outhouse and the woodshed and the generator shed and the barn. And I would like to get those all taken down to make it less likely that I'll have damage to a building. And speaking of the woodshed, this is another thing on my list. Actually a little embarrassed to say, I ran out of firewood this year. I want to fill this entire shed, floor to ceiling, front to back and side to side, with firewood this year. That's going to be a long project, but I also enjoy splitting firewood, so it's an enjoyable one at least. So hopefully I'll never run into the problem of needing to chop firewood out in the middle of winter so I can heat my house. The next thing on the to-do list is to either repair or replace the stairs that go down to the river. This is crooked and janky, and whoever built it, I think, didn't sink the posts deep enough, and so they're all cockeyed, and so that's, you know, a little bit hazardous to get down to the river that way. In fact, usually I take the hill instead of the stairs, because, you know, it's 30-40 feet down to the river, so it's be nice to get you know, have a safe way to get up and down to the river. And speaking of the river, this is just a beautiful place to be, and I'm sure other people would enjoy it. And since we're always looking for ways to make some income on the homestead here, I think that, another thing on the list is to make a good sized clearing and build a tiny house. Eventually, I'd like to have several little tiny houses for people to come camping on, and we can rent out the tiny houses. The river goes along two sides of the property, and it's a 1/4 mile square, so there's plenty of places that I can build tiny houses with a nice view of the river and in the woods. So building a tiny house is on my wish list for this year. I don't know if it'll be done, but that's one thing I'd definitely like to do. The next thing on the to-do list is to finish this project that I started quite a long time ago, and it got set on the back burner. Some of you may have seen the video. This is the beginnings to a frame to hold solar panels to power the house. That back behind it is just an impromptu sawbuck for cutting firewood, but this is one of my big projects, is to get solar panels considerably more substantial than the little tiny one there from Harbor Freight, but get some real solar panel power into the house. And speaking of power, another thing on my to-do list of dream projects is a water wheel with a hydroelectric generator. I plan to eventually, maybe not this year, but that's definitely up there on my to-do list, is that designing and building a water wheel that will turn either in this creek, or down there's the river that it runs into. Oh, sorry if I'm a little winded. I've been walking all over. You know, you miss all the trudging around parts, but so this creek goes under this little bridge that crosses the creek and then runs into the river that's down here. And both the creek and the river run year round, and it'd be nice to have backup power to the solar panels. This bridge here, another thing on my list, is not only to repair this bridge here that's kind of falling apart and has a tree falling across it, but another thing is to build a bridge across the river, which that's going to be a really big project because the river's pretty wide. But I want to build a bridge across the river, and That way I can get to the other side. The Piece of Eden Homestead extends on the other side of the river. And it'd be nice to get over there because that's a floodplain. And I'd like to dig a pond out over there. So, and maybe stock it with fish. So we have, a good source of fish protein on the property. Well, not sure how well this will come up in the dappled sunlight, but right over there's the saw shed and some other outbuildings. And you can see there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 trees, 7 trees that have blown over. And these aren't quite as close as the one to the house, but I definitely need to take a lot of these trees out to reduce the risk of losing a building. So, next thing on the to-do list is to improve the soil here. Let me flip you around and I'll show you why. So I brought you down into this excavation of where a future greenhouse is going to go. But just to show you, I have a good cross section of the soil, and as you can see, it is literally pure sand. The top part is sand with a little bit of soil mixed in from years of decay from leaves and stuff in the woods here, but for the most part, an inch or two down, and it's just pure sand, like beach sand. And that soil, or that sand, not only doesn't hold any nutrients, but any nutrients you put in the soil just wash right through. So been doing a lot of research on terra petra, which is a pretty fascinating subject, but a lot of research about that brings you to biochar and all its benefits that helps basically make charcoal, and then you charge it with nutrients from compost tea or whatever, and then bacteria and fungi from leaf mold and wood mold and stuff like that, rotten logs and stuff. And that the charcoal soaks all those nutrients in, and then you put it in your ground, and that makes it available for the plants. And also any more nutrients that fall get soaked back up into the charcoal, as well as water, which is another problem here. Even though we have an unending supply of water with the artesian well we have here, you just water it and the water soaks right through. So you have to water pretty much every day because the sand won't hold any water. The first year that I put a garden in here, I started with some tomato plants about 4 inches tall, watered them every day, and by the end of the year they were like 6 or 8 inches tall. They barely grew at all. Didn't get any production out of the garden that first year we were here, and it was quite sad to go to the trouble of preparing a garden and then not get any produce out of it. Last year with the garden beds that I showed you, they produced quite well, but I put, just like I did the hugelkultur, where you put the rotten logs and boards and stuff in the bottom of the beds, and then I mixed topsoil from the woods and sawdust in the top part of the bed, and that gave me some water holding capacity as well as nutrients. And so I actually got a pretty decent harvest out of those 2 beds this year, or last year I should say. So I'm going to continue with that, but I'm also going to incorporate the biochar into the mix for the new beds. And I plan to make literally a ton or more of charcoal for that project, because I also want to till it into the existing orchard that's kind of struggling along, and then also prepare beds for strawberries and asparagus, and a bed for a vineyard for grapevines. So anyway, that biochar thing is going to be a pretty big project as well. So let's see what's next on the list. Next on the list is some pretty major cleaning. I got to clean out this here barn, clean out the garden shed that's back in there, clean out the wood shed and build a little better platform for the wood to sit on, and clean out the generator shed and the chicken coop and the bulldozer shed, and been saving all these windows here for a greenhouse. I need to find a better storage system because, as you can see, when the snow melts on the roof of the barn, it slides right down onto these windows. So fortunately we haven't had any breakage yet, but I still want to find a better storage solution for these windows until I can get the greenhouse built. So the next thing on the list is to address the issue with this propane tank. I'm not sure how well you can tell on the video, but it should be straight up and down, and instead it's cockeyed over here. And that's because if you look down here, when they installed it, they just kind of set it on some little thin bricks, and the bricks have broken and sank with the freezing and thawing of the ground. And that's going to be no small task, because that's 1,000-gallon propane tank, and I'm trying to run it down to nothing before I do it, so it'll be a little lighter to move, because obviously if it was full I wouldn't be able to move it at all. But that's a really high priority on the list too. So this is what we call the generator shed. It's got a big sliding door here. Inside are 2 propane generators that provide power for the house until I can get alternative power. And attached to that is the chicken coop. But as you can see, the paint is peeling off pretty bad. Fortunately, I used to be a professional painter, so I should be able to do a pretty darn good job of, you know, scraping and prepping and painting the generator shed so it'll last for years to come. All right, so I'm down here at the orchard, which is behind the solar kiln over there, and I thought I'd go over a couple of the other things on my list here. Let me flip you around. So this is a solar electric fence charger, and all around the orchard here, I cut down trees for posts and put posts around it, and then we put up this electric wire here to keep the deer out of the orchard. Unfortunately, this fence is not strong enough to deter the deer, and they would just step over the bottom one and duck under the top or the next one wire and walk right through the forest, or right through the orchard, sorry. So another thing on my list is to build a wooden fence to keep them out a little bit more aggressively, or, you know, just so they can't get in, to keep them from eating all our little blueberry bushes and pear trees and, you know, peach trees and cherry trees and hazelnut trees and stuff like that. So you might notice the wire is very slack right now. That's because we cut it so my nephew could get his camper back here for hunting season. So all the, you know, there's no tension on the line right now, but it wasn't keeping the deer out anyway, so it all needs to be disassembled. In addition to that, I'll talk about it, the next one here. All right, so in addition to the fence, I also want a good pollinators for the orchard, and for that I want to start keeping bees. Of course, being a do-it-yourselfer that I am, I plan to actually build the boxes, the hive boxes for the bees. So that's going to be one of the projects that I'm going to tackle quite soon, because that needs to be done right away so I can get the bees in here. I have a few other things on the to-do list, like eventually I'd like to build a big outdoor wood-fired clay pizza oven. I'd like to build a forge to start blacksmithing, stuff like that. Those are way down on the priority list, but if I have the opportunity and the energy, then I might tackle those projects this year too. So without boring you any further about all the stuff I have to do this year, hopefully I'll be able to produce some videos on some of these things and Like you can check out a beekeeping video that I made with a friend of mine, Mike, at his house. He's probably where I'll source my bees from. But anyway, hopefully we'll have some how-to videos on how I'm going to get all this stuff done. And it's been a while since I made a video, so I wanted to at least get this out there and show you, you know, all the things I want to accomplish, and keep a positive attitude, one step at a time, one day at a time, and one dream at a time, and have this place looking pretty great in not too long. Anyway, thanks for joining me. If you like what I'm doing here, feel free to subscribe to the channel, punch that like button, maybe tell a friend so we can build this channel up. I'll try to be a little better about producing videos a little bit more quickly because it's been a very long time since I made one. So anyway, thanks a lot. Hopefully you can find your own little piece of homestead and enjoy life like I do. So thanks a lot.